Good afternoon. I think it's a very interesting topic, and Nagesh summed it up very well. I think he put it across what is going to be not only 2021, but what it's going to be 20. We need to think of what's going to be in 2024 and beyond. I think that is what we need to lay the foundation now. I was just reflecting on this, topic, evolving role, and fortunately, I started my career in the 80s when there was no HR. It was personnel management, and it was all about IR and ER, where the HR guy was more, in terms of a policeman managing labor unions and, canteens and welfare. That's what was HR, and HR didn't really, come into prominence. And I saw it evolve in the knowledge and information era when IT got in. At that time, that is when HR became a resource which is critical and important. And then HR was valued. And that is when Infosys, where from Krish spoke now, had brought Mohandas Pai from a CFO to a CHRO. And that is the kind of importance actually moved for HR, because actually HR's value grew much higher, and the assets which were, those PCs and laptops came down. That was how it was. And later in the communication era, as we've seen, things all changed. And during the communication era, we in retail have also seen retail becoming retail and e-commerce taking in. And then, everything becoming, glued on to your smartphone or to, 4G or 5G. And that is when I think, customer service orientation, customer experience, where people's focus needed to change, had all changed. So that is when I think in the communication, this era has been more a service era. And also the fact, if you look at it today, I think nobody expected, COVID, nobody expected pandemic, and things have all, nobody would have even, heard of a word called new normal. And we are all talking about new normal. And that is what I think has evolved, and we are part of this era. And we need to see how to get things right and how HR can make an impact in this era. So I think excellent topic chosen by Rai. Make sure this is, I think, the 11th MMR that I'm attending. Every MMR has been of a different kind of, recipe. I think this is very, very critical and important, and glad we had Nagesh to kind of give us insights on this topic. So let me not hold the panelists. We have a really esteemed list of panelists from GRV, who manages about 2 lakh people in Reliance Retail, to each one of them who have in their own right, been, HR stalwarts and have a good, background in various, in HR especially, I think in retail especially. And that is what I think is the strength of this panel. And let me just start off maybe asking each of the panel members, what, according to you, will be the evolving role of HR in 2021 and beyond? So what, maybe in a minute or so, you can give a gist, and then we'll go into each of what could be critical, key, and what we need to talk of, which could be of interest to the delegates. Yeah, maybe we'll have Shefta start, maybe, I think and then we can go around. Yeah, Shefta, over to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for the opportunity today. It's wonderful to be here on this platform with the esteemed speakers. So I think if we had looked at this question 18 months ago, there would have been a very different answer. 18 months have brought in more change than possibly years before that. And I think the evolving role of HR has really expanded, but has also accelerated to help business bring in digitization. I think that would be the first key one. How do we bring that digital mindset? How do we bring the digitization way of working? How do we upskill employees to usher in and embrace the change that is anyway happening? So I think that would be the first one. And the second one, through the years that I have worked, and I think is constantly evolving and will now, I think, enter another exciting phase, is how do we get that seat on the table again to talk to business and be closer to business and really have that value add. I've heard many colleagues through the COVID area say, HR is no longer an afterthought, but now it's front and center because we made so many changes and we ushered in so much help for the organization for the last 18 months. So I'll keep it short. Those would be my two.
Thanks, Shefta. Can we have GRV? I mean, your thoughts, GRV?
Hey, hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Venkat. I hope I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Lawrence, and the wonderful team at RAI for hosting this great event. I think this is one event that all of us across the country, across the industry, we look forward to kind of meet up and share our views on HR and HR management. So it's been a great event so far, and I'm sure today is also going to be very, very interesting. So thank you for inviting me to this panel. To answer your question, Venkat, I think we must all realize that we are living through times which are extraordinary. Okay, and extraordinary not only from the pandemic perspective, but also from the perspective that the business itself is in great throes of transition. When we talk about retail, we're not talking about omni-channel. We're talking about online shifting more towards offline, offline shifting more towards on. And we've been always talking about this. For the great 18 months that we've seen, the last 18 months, a great shift has happened and a great momentum has, arrived in this space. Nagesh spoke about gig and the very nature of the employment models changing. The whole pandemic has brought to the fore in terms of the whole concept and issue about employee care, mental well-being, as well as a great subject on how do we sustain the environment. Because if we go back to the history of why Corona started in the first place, the whole issue of environmental sustainability itself are these are the kind of questions that we today in this forum are discussing in terms of changing employment models, business models, and issues related to, let's say, mental health, okay, employee care, technology, and analytics. All of these are now getting bucketed together. When have we ever in our careers gone through any phase in our lives or in our careers where we have discussed such disparate subjects in one breath? So I think we are living through extraordinary times, and we must learn a lot and we must contribute a lot for a better future tomorrow. So for that 1 minute that you gave me to for opening, I think I'll just stop here.
Great justice, GRV, for that 1 minute. I think a lot of insights. I think we have a lot more to speak. So maybe we can have Shekhar, your thoughts or in how.
I think we all know about the uncertain, ambiguous times, and I think we all are aware about that. I think, to my mind, three roles that I think HR will evolve into and is already evolving into. I think the first role really is that of a friend for the employee, really. We all know that the recent crisis has exposed fault lines between the employee and the organization or the manager on the one side, fault lines even between the employee and his family or the social network outside the organization. And I think HR, to my mind, has the role to really act like a friend, maybe even a best friend for the employee at work. So that to me is one role. I think the crisis also has perhaps brought upon us new habits, new work models, new ways of looking at things, both at an individual level as an organizational level. And I think, therefore, the second role to my mind is that of an active, very active change manager. Does HR understand what does it need to change for itself and for the larger organization? What new leadership abilities do the leaders in the organization need? So I think there's an active role around being effective change managers. And to my mind, the third one really is, it has been a very, very stressful times. Nagesh was kind enough to, tell us that, look, HR guys have gone through a lot of stress times, but I think everybody, starting from the CEO all the way down, everybody has been under stress. And to my mind, the role of HR as being emotional, bulwarks, if it were, How can HR play the role of being an emotional anchor? How can HR recognize what are the emotions that my leader is currently undergoing? What are the stress levels in the organization today at middle level, at junior levels? And what can HR really do to mitigate this stress? So to my mind, these are the three evolving roles of HR as I see it. Thank you.
Yeah, Shekhar, yes. I think three important roles I think is very critical, and that's what most of us are playing. And maybe we can have Venki talk about this. Yeah, Venki with...
Yeah, hi Venkat. Thanks, Roy, for giving this platform for all of us to come together. In my point of view, Venkat, is see, things are changing. We have seen in 18 months plus where there is an uncertainty. This has also made us to think that there is nothing called impossible. Everything is possible. So the virus has really taught us that how to really survive and overcome and really succeed in difficult times. So transformation is going to be a key role going forward. How are we really going to differentiate between the normal and the new normal? What is also happening is somewhere we are not realizing that the new normal is not all about something that everything is going to be new. So there are certain things which is going to stay, and we have to necessarily differentiate between what is going to be normal and what is going to be new normal, and anchor the transformation. That is very, very important. Creating a very an organizational mental modeling during these changes is also the key. When we talk about change, the change is not only about the employees' change. It is about, as an organization, how the organization is going to change and adapt. How are the leaders going to change and adapt? So it's a full layer of changes which needs to happen, and people have to adapt to the new normal which we intend to move on. These are the two key roles which it comes to my mind immediately. One more thing is when we talk about technology, digitalization, yes, it's very, very important. Somewhere we need to necessarily hold on our empathy. It's very, very important. And the employee connect, because sometimes in the form of technology and digitalization and whatever other things we call it as, we lose the track of keeping relationship in an organization. And in my opinion, the future organization is going to be lot to do with relationship building, because that is what, if not in India, the Indian psyche stands for emotions, and we strongly believe in relationships than anything else, right from the customer to an employee to an organization. Thanks, Venkat.
Yeah, thanks, Venki. Diya?
Very warm good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for having me here. I think everyone's shared a lot of points. I think I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of summarize and add a bit of my perspective. So I think obviously, with the changing times, there is a whole rise of new competencies for HR as a professional itself. And very rightly said by everybody, the digital, transformations have been pulled forward by 5 to 10 years, depending on where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. And this leads us to say, okay, with more data available, easily available, how well can HR professionals, take decisions, make informed decisions, and help the organization also start building as a talent on, being able to build their technology, being able to actually use data better. The second piece is being able to keep a pulse of the organization in terms of talent, whether it's on the SQ, EQ, or IQ. And as HR professionals, a larger emphasis on coaching and counseling, because while there is a concern on mental health, how effective are we in that space? And, having actual pulse checks on these parameters to be, in know-how of where your organization really stands. And I think thirdly is the whole diversity agenda. So when we look at practices and policies, depending on how decisions emerge in the new normal, are you going to be a hybrid, virtual, physical, workforce? How are we going to look at inclusiveness? Because that's really going to translate into the meaningful change. So that's the way I would, kind of share the points over there.
Thanks, Diya. I think we've laid the foundation for a great discussion. So let me go into some specifics. Today, I mean, we were all worried about the millennials, right? How do we manage the millennials? How is it? But now we're moving to Gen Z, and they are, people who definitely are very different. And that's going to be a challenge for HR people in the future. And how are we going to invest and manage on this talent? I mean, especially the Gen Z. I think we'll have Shefta. You take this. I think you would have great insights. I'm sure with your background, having worked in UK, London School of Economics, and Mercer, and everything. I'm sure you would give great insights into what research says and what will be reality.
Thank you for the opportunity. So it's a subject close to my heart because I remember when I started working, I was that elusive millennial and people were trying to figure out how do we engage millennials? And I find myself now asking the same question. So India is the largest Gen Z population holder. Looking at different reports, Gen Z are people born after 1995 or 1997. Nonetheless, the reality is that they have entered the workforce. The last time I reviewed data within Adidas, about 10 to 11% of our organization is already Gen Z, and obviously growing, coming into our stores, coming into our back office teams, and so on and so forth. So obviously the starting point is when you're looking at any employee group, what matters to them. And all the topics that this team panel just spoke about, actually Gen Z cares about it very deeply. Diversity and inclusion. There have been big efforts. It's not just about gender diversity. We know right now there is a lot about LGBTQI. It's about, can I just be the person I am? Am I in an inclusive workplace? Can I bring my authentic self to work? They care about what social impact the business is having. So do you as a business help build a positive impact on earth through the environment, through diversity and inclusion? And they obviously care about career paths in a different way. What we are realizing with early research, and Deloitte did a study here, is that Gen Z wants to work in organizations where they can be entrepreneurial about their career decisions. Obviously, the technology industry is very attractive to them, but they're working across all industries, including ours. And they want to have that sense of ownership. They want to drive decisions. They want to know what's going to happen next. So they want to understand how does the organization provide them those opportunities. So I think those are the sort of main characteristics. And probably I'll also speak about personal well-being. I don't think Gen Z sees it as only their, agenda that they need to be fit at their own time or have mental well-being, meditation at their own time. They care about how is the organization supporting them in their own well-being. And I think they're obviously smart enough to know when there are only a couple of initiatives versus it's integrated into the employee life cycle. So you can't do 2 meditation yoga sessions and be done, but it's really how is mental well-being, how is their productivity, how are flexible work hours showing up, all of that. How are we doing it for them? And then obviously taking their inputs and taking them along in the journey. We obviously have companies like Starbucks, which have a millennial earlier, and now I think a Gen Z on their board to kind of help them do that. We have a global diversity inclusion committee where we have a Gen Z on that committee along with very senior folks. So I think they want a voice, they want a platform, and they want a lot of choices. And it's up to us as an organization to figure that out quickly and give that to them.
Yeah, great. I think great insights. Can we have Diya, your points of view on Gen Z?
Right. I think Shefta has put it really, really well over there. So I think millennials and Gen Z, there are a lot of common characteristics among them. But Gen Z, or otherwise known as the Zoomers, being born to the digital age, they've been born into it. And there were 2 parts to your question, Venkat. One was, how do we manage them, and then how do we invest? So I'm going to take the manage piece first. a lot of what we as HR professionals are actually looking out to achieve in the reset as we enter the new normal are actually things that come to them quite naturally, be it the whole digital agenda, be it the fact that, you need people to be able to take accountability and hold others accountable. This is a generation who likes to put their neck out and they're willing to take that personal responsibility. So being able to manage them as, change agents or rally them around would actually work very effectively. And as rightly Shefta said, a lot of these people are being placed to drive such agendas because they enjoy the share of voice. And most importantly, the characteristic of this generation is making the real meaningful change. So I think that's what really sets them out. From a digital point of view, again, they're another group who could be looked upon to propel the change. In fact, the actual survey and research data, again, by McKinsey and Deloitte actually talks about a lot of restlessness in the time that's being taken in this reset. That it comes to them easier while we are trying to rally a larger diverse group of people. So how can we again embed them so that they could be coaching and learning model over there within the organizations? Coming to the invest piece, is it possible to identify some of them and help grow, give them the simulations and help them appreciate the larger set of diverse groups that have to be carried forward, which is going to be very, very important for their careers. The most important piece to dial in over there is they have huge concerns on financial security as well as career prospects. So how could we look at investing on those lines to answer those questions, be it through clear communication on career trajectories, opportunities of development, and how we could partner with them taking that forward.
Great. Yeah, maybe from moving from Gen Z, I was thinking about business sustainability. I think that's also something which is getting to become even tougher by the day, and sustaining whatever. And HR has a major role to play. And how do we manage this change from a HR standpoint is what I was thinking. And especially with these times. Maybe we'll have GRV, your point of view, because you're coming up with every day some business or other. And how is your, from a HR point of view, how do you look at it? I think.
So it's this whole question of sustainability and business sustainability is a difficult question to answer because it has got layers in it. And at the simplistic level, the layer could be in terms of how do you ensure that your business is sustained, okay, and it grows and it makes more profit and therefore perhaps more employment, and therefore what is the role of the HR, etc. But increasingly, we are finding discussions around ESG space coming in and people talking about the sustainability in a bigger or the larger kind of a context that we are talking about. And I think I'll try, if you give me a couple of minutes, then I'll try and bring in linkages to both of these and try to prove in terms of why HR is the forefront of ensuring that the kind of sustainability that we are talking about when we speak about ESG, etc., how does it directly translate into the business profitability kind of normal kind of a definition, or the English dictionary definition of sustainability. Let's look at the months which have gone by. Okay, so one of the great pillars of the ESG kind of sustainability, the more fluffy kind of, and why I'm calling this fluffy is sometimes it's very difficult to put your arms around this whole concept of sustainability. It looks a little abstruse, it looks a little complicated, and because, and why it looks so is that it's very difficult to measure the ROI here. So you don't know that the kind of effort that you're putting in, what exactly is it going to imply when you look at your P&L statements or balance sheet, and therefore many people are very confused. But I can tell you, and Venkat, you've been a veteran in the industry, and Nagesh and Venki and everyone on this panel. And I myself have been in this industry for more than 15 years now. And when I look back, I see community connect. Okay, now community connect as retail employees, it comes as a natural kind of in our DNA. If it doesn't happen, then the business doesn't sustain because our catchment is local. We may have TV ads and we may have anything, but unless we know the customer who's there, who's walking into our brick and mortar store and have an emotional connect with that person, we won't thrive and grow. And much of that came into fore in the last, especially in the first wave and the second wave, when our people went out. Okay, as Reliance Retail sales staff, they went out and helped the people who were in need, whether they were fellow employees or whether they were consumers, whether it was grocery or whether it was any other kind of business. But that is the consumer, it's not consumer connect, it is society connect. You are not looking at bills at that point in time. You're looking in terms of saying that how do you serve a community around you? When we look at our own employees, Nagesh mentioned that we're looking after 2 lakh people currently. Employee care and their families, how do we ensure that they are safe? So currently I'm very proud to tell you that all of our employees are first dose vaccinated and almost 80% of them are second dose vaccinated, and similar figures are there for the family members as well. Now, does this flow in terms of a wider connect to the consumer or the or to the society? Of course, yes. Similarly, environmental considerations. Our chairman has rolled out this new vision on new energy business, etc. And we are actively thinking and considering how all of this, for example, Nagesh spoke about this whole gig economy, the delivery vehicles and all that. It has a huge ramifications in terms of the environmental sustainability and the kind of thing that we're talking about. And we are building models in the retail business towards ensuring that when we do this business, it's green business. It's not which eats away the resources of the economy or the environment to kind of do all of this. Now the whole point is that when all of this comes together, when that the consumer connect or the society connect starts translating into the business results, that's when you start looking at the sustainability part of the business as defined in the English dictionary or the normal definition of sustainability. Then there could be various delivery models, whether you are offline or online or screen based or face to face based or whatever. These are the various mechanisms of interacting with the consumer, understanding their needs, and therefore translating those needs into your business deliverables and ensuring financial viability. So that is really the linkage between this. And why is HR important? HR is, if the nature of the business is changing in terms of gig or in terms of part time or in terms of online, offline or analytics, who's going to lead the whole effort on reskilling of your people, like what was mentioned earlier? We will only have to do it from our shop in terms of ensuring that the people are ready. For our nation is a nation of people, and if so many people suddenly find themselves as not being ready for the next wave of what the economy demands from them, then we will be found lacking or wanting in terms of the need which society has thrown upon us. So I think that is the challenge that the HR folks have currently. And when we deliver on all of this agenda, what are we trying to create? We are trying to create an employer branding for ourselves as an industry, as a company. And if our deliveries or deliverables are in sync with our brand statement, that's when things begin to take a magical turn. So I don't know whether it was a longish answer to your short question, but that is how I look at the whole issue.
Very, very well put across, I think, from an organization's point of view and your point of view. So let us hear Shekhar. Shekhar, how does your organization, the Aditya Birla Group, look at it, and how are you looking at it from a HR standpoint?
I think there are three stakeholder lenses that I really want to look at. One is the consumer lens. So how does a consumer look at an organization who is invested in sustainability? Consumers want more sustainable practices, more sustainable products, sustainable services. They are willing to ditch big brands as long as they find that their passion of sustainability matches with another brand. To that extent, I think the role of HR really is first to talk about this inside the organization. Pick what the customer is asking. It is not the job of the marketing person alone or the job of the CEO alone. I think the HR guy needs to understand what is the consumer saying around sustainability. Create a massive awareness program inside the company for all the employees to know that, look, this is what the customer is asking. Second, In our appraisal conversations, in our goal sheet, for example, does sustainability find a mention at all? That's a question for all of us to ask. And imagine the power if we start saying that, look, this is not something that we want to pay lip service to, but it's really important. And we'd like all our organization employees to really be committed to it. And we would like to measure how are you actually performing against your sustainability targets. And this is right from the CEO all the way to the frontline employee servicing our customer, because only when that happens, the customer gets a sense that this business or this brand is really, really serious about sustainability and does not just want to do a shoddy job or a superficial job or a window dressing job for the sake of it. Employee safety. I mean, a lot of companies, we've done a lot of good work to manage employee care and employee safety during COVID. But I'm sure a common problem that is plaguing many of our, stores in the industry is every time an employee leaves the store and goes back home, many of them use two-wheelers. Two-wheeler road safety is a very, very important element. And of course, there are other issues around safety, but how many of us are really focusing on this element around two-wheeler road safety, in the organization? One of my friends who's not part of the retail industry, he asked me a question and I had no answer. He asked me, your retail guy in the store, how many hours is he fully occupied when he is not stacking, when he's not folding, or when he's not servicing the customer? How come he or she is always standing? Is there a place for him to sit? Is there a place for his or her recreation? I didn't have an answer to that. I tried to give him some wisecrack answer, but you know what? I was only fooling myself, but by saying, well, it's a hazard that we have taken in the industry setup to say, well, this is something you can't do anything about. So I think we need to question some very, very fundamental assumptions behind which we are doing our jobs, our practices purely from a consumer lens. I think the second stakeholder is the community. Does my community and community, is a local community around the store or is a community around my factory? How does my community perceive me? Am I another, private corporate who is out there to only make financial gains? Or do they see me engaged in larger, community development projects which are impacting them? How about running an employee volunteering program where we identify number of projects where we are invested as an organization? We also ask employees, what are the projects that you want to be associated with? What are you passionate about? And how about kind of creating an employee volunteering program for employees to really contribute to the organization agenda as well as to their agenda? We run a very successful employee volunteering program in ABFRL, and we have very often found that HR can do a lot of training programs and engagement programs around bringing team effectiveness. But we have found you unleash a team, tell them to go outside, do some great community work. And we have found that it certainly, apart from impacting the community, it creates a great amount of team bonding and team collaboration, and they come back into the organization as better teams. I think the third stakeholder that I want to highlight from a sustainability angle is the whole piece about why should an employee come and work at a company, or why should an existing employee continue to work for the company? What is the larger agenda and objective? And I really want to put this forward in terms of what's the core purpose of the organization? Why is a company in the business? Is it because it wants to earn money? Or is there a larger purpose that it wants to create? Maybe it wants to make a difference to the community. Maybe it wants to, delight consumers, whatever the company would like to do. And how do I create a linkage between what the individual wants to achieve in his or her life and the larger organizational purpose? If the connection is missing, very often it just becomes a very, very transactional relationship between the employee and the organization. And the employee comes and does some services and gets paid for it, and that's the end of the relationship. And to drive the purpose, I think we need a great culture. We all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's very fashionable for all organizations to say, you know what, we value our employees, we do so much for our employees. Employees are our greatest asset. But you know what, we had one bad quarter, two bad quarters, or we had a long period of COVID and people got downsized. So what happened to your culture and values around employees are our biggest assets? How far are you willing to travel on what you really profess as something that is very dear to you? Or is it only good times that you want to talk about employees being our greatest assets, and in bad times you tell them to go home because it becomes unaffordable? Nagesh was alluding to a beautiful point earlier that we are today, working at pre-COVID levels, but working with a lesser number of workforce. Do employees very often pay for the fault of HR managers who don't do a good productive job on what is actually the manpower requirement and hire people accordingly? And I think the last piece really is about leadership DNA. How do all of us as leaders, our CEOs, our brand heads, how do we behave during COVID crisis and any other crisis for that matter? Do we kind of completely, go scatter, or do we kind of hold the organization, steer them to positivity, steer them to optimism, keep innovating, ourselves, look at permanent structural changes and permanent changes in the ways of working? So to my mind, from the lens of these three stakeholders, I think it becomes very important for us to keep continuously, visiting the agenda around sustainability. And I believe employees will be at the forefront of this agenda around sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, Shekhar. No, I was thinking, with the Gen Z, what Shefta was talking about, things are going to change, in terms of values, culture, definitely, in terms of monotony in the job, in a retail job, standing for 8 hours, no recreation. So all these we need to rethink. I think at the end of the day, to have a sustainable business, I think we definitely need to relook at the whole thing, and HR does have a great role to play there. So let us move on to a topic which I think in a lot of companies are getting in, and HR is also getting in very much, basically on technology and in terms of technology and analytics. I think in HR, I mean, how do we look at technology supporting us going forward? And how is analytics very critical? And how are your organizations managing these? Maybe we'll start with Venki. Venki, you can talk about shoppers, what you're doing, and how do you think, from your point of view, what do you think?
Yes, Venkat. See, going forward, in fact, technology, moving into technology has been happening for years. We just moved into a kind of technology long back in terms of how most of the transaction job has been moved into the system in terms of hiring, in terms of sourcing and all these things. Now, if you really look at it, the future is going to be more of how are we going to move into artificial intelligence, people analytics, and it's all going to be metrics. And if you look at shoppers, apart from moving into a technology and moving, thanks to COVID, this 18 to 20 months, we have more moved into a kind of digitalization. Most of these systems and processes has been morely focused on digitalization. At the same time, we also have to keep in touch with the previous element which I spoke about, is the empathy and the touch of employee. That is also going to be important. We ensure that although we have a technology, the artificial intelligence or people analytics, which we operate with in whatever the initial stages, we also ensure that there are other part of human resource, as a human resource professional, in terms of connectivity and response with the employee queries and things like that. Wherever there needs to be an employee touch, we ensure even that is also is intact. Okay. That's from my side.
Yeah. So coming back, on work hours, the working ways of working today, especially in retail. So how flexi is flexi? I mean, the work hours, and what is the future way of working going to be in retail? Maybe Shefta, you can add some your kind of point of view here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity once again. I don't think anyone has a success model on what would flexible truly look like. But if you would have asked 3-4 years back, possibly even in our offices, we would have never imagined the level of flexibility we can do. So never say never. But I do think that there need to be some enablers which allow for greater flexibility than there is right now. So are we leveraging part-time enough? Are we leveraging, just some of the examples that especially Mr. Chandrashekhar brought out? Can people be their authentic selves? Are they seen as those human beings that they're standing there for 8 hours, but they also have families at home, they're caregivers? What are we doing to allow them to be themselves fully? I think the part I'll probably concentrate on is that clearly that couple of enablers need to be put into place. And one of that, to allow for more time, for more flexibility, is obviously technology. We just spoke about that in terms of how we get insights maybe, or what's coming up, but there have to be more tools which allow for lesser manual work and more automation that needs to come into play. There's obviously right now in India, WhatsApp for Business that is starting. Do you really need to be at the store to do that? China, of course, does a lot of selling through video. If we are going to have retail experts in that field in India soon, they don't need to be, working 8-9 hours at a regular pace as we understand now. So if we keep up with the future trends and marry technology to that, it's definitely, there's a lot of scope to do things. The second one is workforce planning. I think for us to be able to do a good job on workforce planning will only allow for more flexible options to come into play. I think that's clear. Scheduling, how do we get better at it, and so on and so forth. And I think the last one I'd probably say is when we make any changes, reward strategy needs to catch up. So the benefits, the compensation, what we offer to the employee as a full package should match that, and be it the case with flexible working options, that probably be an enabler too. So my answer was a little bit more of, I think, the foundation we need to lay versus what will it look like right now.
Yeah, I think we have some questions from the audience. Before that, maybe 1 or 2 topics we'll touch. I think we have another 5 minutes to go. So I was thinking, today there is a lot of fear and uncertainty because of the pandemic. And how do we manage emotions at workplace? I think that's something which definitely HR has a very major role to play, because we are all emotional beings, and there at the workplace, especially in the retail store, it's going to be very difficult. So Shekhar, you want to take this?
I think 2 aspects to that, to my mind, Venkat and fellow panel members. One is pre-COVID, and one is certainly during the pandemic and post-pandemic. I think fear has been an integral part, I would say, of a lot of situations, setups, and organizations that I've come across, including mine. And I certainly want to believe that very often, if there is a mistake that has got committed, somebody knew about this mistake all along, but nobody wanted to talk about it because the boss may feel bad, there is a consequence, full data may be asked for. We don't want to take a decision unless full data has been asked for. And this really brings to the fore this whole concept around psychological safety, to say, do I feel safe in this environment? Do I feel safe with my manager? Do I feel safe in the work group that I'm a part of? And it's a very, very deep question. And do I feel that my manager will give me sufficient air cover every time I make a mistake or every time I have a half-baked idea? So I want to actually flip the question the other way around by saying, what should we actually do to drive psychological safety in organizations? because you can't tame fear. You can only convert fear into a positive energy such that people are willing to come forward, conquer their fears, and talk about issues that bother them. Talk about what did the customer say today, which is completely different than what the big boss spoke about. I think if we are in a position to unleash fear, we will create a huge amount of positive multiplier impact in the organization. Just to throw some data point here, Project Aristotle, many of us may be familiar with that. Google found out that among the 4 factors, clarity of roles and team impact, etc., psychological safety was one factor which contributed humongously to effective teamwork and collaboration. And I think HR will have a major role to play in creating the psychological safety. I often wonder, in any day in our respective organizations, we must be having tons and tons and tons of review meetings. If we are to sit in those review meetings, what do we observe? Some may be HR review meetings, some may be business review meetings. Do employees leave the meeting feeling inspired, or do they leave the meeting feeling fearful, hurt, disrespected? I think to my mind, if we can make more and more attempt to let employees feel inspired by tinkering with something as basic as how should a review in a business be conducted, I think we would have moved significantly ahead. So I think to me, it's a large agenda. Recently some more work we're trying to do in this area as an organization. But to me, psychological safety is a big issue that I think we all need to be looking at as we go ahead from here. And maybe the title of the HR guy actually ought to be Chief Psychological Safety Officer. Just expand the normal safety officer's role that we typically have today. Back to you, Venkat.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not Chief Psychological Officer.
Not yet.
Great. So I think we had 1 or 2 minutes. So I thought some more insights from the speakers, because that's important. And GRV, can you let us know in terms of what will be the new age competencies, in the new or normal, which are key, which will become very key.
You're talking competencies for the HR professionals? Or,
yes, for the HR professionals.
Okay, there are many, and I'm sure we can have a longish discussion on what kind of competencies are needed for the times to come on, as we go along. But I think I'll just speak about 2. And one is that we all have to learn to become outcome focused. I think gone is the era that we used to have a set kind of mind frame in terms of how we should operate, what time we should operate, and we used to keep a time clock. And you spoke about your days as a personnel manager, and I'm sure that should resonate to you at that era. But today, even if we talk about the millennials, etc., what they want is a new kind of an experience every 4 months. And that can come only when the whole organization pivots itself to understand that outcomes are important and not kind of the efforts, or not kind of the process which goes behind it. And therefore, how do you make it an experience based out of outcome management and outcome measurement and outcome rewards, and the entire HR strategy can then start revolving around this whole concept of how do you manage outcomes. And I think that's one, and we need to all learn about it. The second one is cultural, which is in terms of how do you ensure that data and analytics and thinking about data analytics seeps into your way of working. And I have seen traditionally HR people feel a little shy of data analytics, mathematics, logic, and things like those. Not logic perhaps, but mathematics surely. And somewhere down the line, I think one has to understand that you cannot be living in an era where you start asking questions to Google and talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but not learn those tricks yourself in terms of how do you make sure the technology is a slave to you in terms of serving your people and taking care of them and making sure that everyone is healthy, happy. So I'll just stop here. As I said, there is a list, but these are two on top of my mind.
Because I'm sure each of you have a list of competencies that you would like to share. But Hugo, we're running out of time, right? The session should be over by 3:20 is what I was given to understand. So great. So it was a great session. Thank you, panelists. I think there was a lot of learning, I'm sure, for myself and for the participants. It have been great. So I think we all came together very well and put across, and we would be part of the evolving era, which is going to be the post-pandemic era. And 2021 and onwards, I'm sure it's going to be much, much better, much more safer, and much more happier. Thank you so much.